time leaks and soul fractures. Consider the possibility that time is not a one-way river, but a permeable membrane. For most of us, the past is sealed behind us, accessible only through the fragile mechanism of our own memory. But in the cases we're exploring, it's as if time develops a leak. The memories of a past era seep through that membrane, dripping into the mind of a child born years or centuries later. These leaks in time challenge our fundamental notions of linearity. They hint that under extraordinary circumstances, the wall that separates then from now can become porous. One striking example of a time leak comes from mid-20th century Soviet history. In a cold industrial town in Russia, a boy named Mikhail exhibited a peculiar phobia from toddlerhood. He was terrified of windows. While other children drew crayon pictures of sunshine through the glass, Mikhail would beg his parents to close the curtains. "Someone might shoot me," he insisted, with grave seriousness, peering at the empty window frame as if expecting a sniper's bullet at any moment. His parents were baffled. The family lived in a peaceful home. There were no violent incidents in their neighborhood, no personal history that could explain such a fear. For a time, they assumed Mikhail would outgrow this nervous habit, but he did not. As he grew into a preschooler, Mikhail's behavior only became more hauntingly specific. One evening, while watching an old black and white film with his father, the little boy suddenly pointed at a scene depicting a Soviet government building from the 1950s. "I remember that place," he whispered, his hand trembling. It was a building no one in the family had ever seen in person. And yet Mikhail spoke as if he knew it intimately. He went on to say, in a halting voice, "I worked there before they shot me." By the time he was 4, Mikhail began to divulge even more disturbing details about his past life. He claimed he had been an important man who wore a uniform. He said, "I made enemies. They wanted me gone. One night I stood by a window and they shot me in the head." His mother sucked in a breath. "Who shot you?" she asked. Mikhail shook his head. "I don't know his name, but I know why they did it." Disturbed yet intrigued, Mikhail's father started researching historical records based on the clues his young son had given. The pieces fell into place. There really was a man whose life fit the boy's story. A mid-level official named Alexei Volkov, who had been killed in the 1950s under murky circumstances. Officially, Volkov's death had been labeled a suicide, a convenient cover story in a time and place where political murders were often swept under the rug. Unofficially, it was whispered that he had been assassinated by state agents at his home, shot through a window at night, exactly as Mikhail described. Crucially, some of the details Mikhail gave were never publicly known. In private Soviet archives, it was noted that Volkov had been shot in the right temple and that blood spattered the curtains next to the window. This was not common knowledge, not the sort of thing one finds in history books or casual conversation. Yet a child, born decades later, with no obvious connection to that time, knew it intimately, knew it viscerally, as evidenced by his abiding terror of windows and the way his hand would fly to his temple in pain. Mikhail's story suggests that time can loop back on itself in the strangest of ways. It is as though the traumatic end of Volkov's life punched a hole in the fabric of time, a hole through which some part of his memory leaked forward into the consciousness of a child born in a new era. We might call it a haunting or a possession in another context. But Mikhail never spoke of being haunted. He spoke in first person. I worked there. They shot me. He possessed Volkov's memories as his own. When his parents took him to Moscow to visit the area where Volkov had lived, Mikhail navigated the streets with unerring familiarity and stopped cold in front of an old apartment, declaring it to be my home. He had never been there in this life. Somehow, the map of a life that ended before his began was imprinted in his mind. Now imagine a leak in time, not of decades, but of millennia. In modern Cairo, a little girl named Amira stunned her parents with tales of palace intrigue in the days of the pharaohs. From the time she could string sentences together, she spoke of a life in a grand palace, of golden jewelry, and of walking barefoot on cool stone floors. Her parents were educated people, teachers, who at first found this only mildly amusing, like a child who's been overindulging in fairy tales. But the tone of Amira's play acting was different. There was a gravity to it. One night, as the family watched a documentary about ancient Egypt on television, a scene of the Nile Palace triggered something in the little girl. She clutched her throat in terror and said, "He poisoned me. The man I trusted the most poisoned me." It was an oddly specific fear, nothing like the typical nightmares children have. When pressed gently for more details, Amira revealed an entire narrative. Her name had been Neferet. She was a member of a pharaoh's court, and she had been betrayed and murdered by someone close to her. Intrigued and a bit frightened, her father, who happened to be a history teacher, decided to take Amira on a trip to the Egyptian Museum, hoping perhaps to expose a childish fantasy. Instead, the visit only deepened the mystery. As they wandered through exhibits of ancient artifacts, Amira grew agitated. "Not here," she kept saying, pulling them along until she abruptly froze in front of one particular display. It was a statue of a noblewoman from an ancient dynasty. Amira reached out a tiny hand to the inscription on the plaque and read the name aloud. Neferet. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "That was me." Her mother's breath caught. The museum placard indeed named the statue as a royal companion called Neferet, whose cause of death was unknown. Yet here was their 4-year-old daughter, eyes welling with tears, telling them exactly how Neferet died, by treachery and poison. News of Amira's recollections eventually reached local Egyptologists. Perhaps they hoped to find it a hoax, but instead, their research corroborated the essentials of her story. In dusty scrolls and carved stone, they found references to a court lady who died under suspicious circumstances during the reign of a certain pharaoh. Rumors of poisoning, whispers of a conspiracy, but nothing definite, until a little girl, thousands of years later, spoke as that long-dead woman and completed the tale. In Amira's case, no criminal could be brought to justice. The offender was dust and bones long before she was born. Yet, the truth of an ancient murder, lost to history, managed to resurface in the present. It's as if the injustice left a kind of spiritual imprint so strong that it transcended time, lodging itself in the psyche of a child born in an era when the language of Neferet's world is now decipherable only through archaeology. Such examples reveal the porousness of time under extraordinary conditions. Traumatic endings, especially those involving betrayal, violence, or injustice, seem to be the common denominator. The intensity of these events might be what tears the fabric, creating a rift through which memory travels. Like a powerful signal that refuses to fade, the unresolved emotions and images find a new receiver in the form of a receptive young mind. In this sense, reincarnation memories are time leaks in the cosmos, anomalies where the past broadcasts itself into the present, sometimes across years, sometimes across centuries or more. But it's not only time that is scarred by these events. The soul, if we can call it that, also carries the wounds. We might think of these as soul fractures, psychological or even physical signs in a child that reflect the trauma of a past death. The most visible example is the phenomenon of birthmarks and scars. Researchers have noted that a surprising number of children who remember past lives also bear a mark on their body corresponding to the fatal wound of the person they remember being. The pattern is too frequent to ignore. In Thailand, Niran's long, dark birthmark stretched across his chest at the exact site where he said a bullet passed through him. In Myanmar, little Aung Min had a round, coin-sized mark on his back. He later recalled being shot from behind while running his gold shop, exactly matching the location of his injury. In Nigeria, a boy named Obina was born with a faded, reddish line encircling his neck like a necklace, a chilling reminder of the throat slashing he would later describe undergoing in a ritual sacrifice. It is as if the last scream of pain from a previous life etched itself into the new flesh, leaving a signature for us to find. Then there are the internal scars, the phobias, nightmares, and emotional imprints that these children carry from the first days of life. We encountered Mikhail's window phobia, which only made sense in light of his past assassination. Similarly, there was a Japanese toddler named Haruto who burst into tears at the sight of even a toy sword, whimpering, "Not again. Please, not again." long before he could articulate what he meant. Only years later did he explain that he remembered being a swordsman, a samurai, who was stabbed by those he trusted during a feudal betrayal. In Brazil, a little girl would break into hysterics at the smell of smoke from cooking fires. She couldn't explain why until she began to recall being burned alive as part of a tribal punishment generations ago. This has been an excerpt from Reincarnation Files by Sam Elliott. Check out Elliott's new book, Paranormal Imprints, for an in-depth look in to how some ghosts leave a mark on reality. Paranormal Imprints by Sam Elliott is available now.